Hi, I'm Becky, and welcome to another episode of Diet Culture Can Fork Off. I help women over 30 stuck in diet cycles create that food freedom and feel confident in their bodies. And that's by breaking down diet culture's hold without focusing on the scales or missing out on living. And that's all through my one-to-one Empower coaching or my Misfit Club group coaching. In today's episode, I am delighted to have Chloe with me, who's a women's health physio and researcher. I know many of you struggle with the overwhelming amount of information out there in regards to women's health. So Chloe is here to help with sorting out the myths from the facts. Hi Chloe, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. I'm very excited about this conversation. But can you tell everyone a bit about who you are and the work that you do?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm Chloe. I am a women's health physiotherapist. So what that means is that term can be used interchangeably as a pelvic health physiotherapist, but I mainly work with women. So I work within the NHS, and that is helping women with gynecological issues like incontinence or prolapse. Pelvic pain, pregnancy related issues, things like endometriosis, and then obviously moving more into menopause and things which would embody or encompass the incontinence and prolapse things. So that is my clinical work, and then I also am currently doing my PhD, which is in resistance training and menopause. So we're looking at the effects of resistance training on menopause symptoms, specifically pelvic floor related symptoms. So that's really takes up most of my time at the moment. So everything I do is really centered around women's health, and I would say particularly focused in pregnancy and then moving forward into midlife and menopause related issues.
I love that. So what made you specialise in women's health and that phase of life specifically?
So I never really wanted to work in women's health. My mum's a midwife, and when I left school, I actually went and worked. I went to study French and Spanish, but through my own health complications, I had to leave university, and I started working in maternity as an assistant, and I did that for about 4 years. But I knew I wanted to go into physiotherapy, but I really enjoyed midwifery as well, and I think really women's health physiotherapy brought the two together for me, working with women and also being a physiotherapist. And then I think as my career has kind of evolved, I've just seen a huge kind of exploitation and predatory practices around women at vulnerable stages of their life, but particularly in menopause. And so I think that's really where I wanted to niche down into, because I think there's so much confusing and misinformation at that time in a woman's life that actually I want to be a bit of a person that gives congruent evidence-based advice that isn't confusing to women. So I think that's really how I got here.
Yeah, I love that because, like you said, there's a lot of misinformation out there, or not enough information as well. But yeah, what do you wish more women did know about perimenopause or menopause?
Um, there's so much, but if I start with the fact that I think one of the biggest things is that I don't think you need anything complicated. And I think when you kind of scroll through social media, what you'd think is you need 50,000 different supplements, that you need to have a specific exercise training program because you are perimenopausal or menopausal, that you need to follow some special diet, when actually the reality is that you are still a human being, and actually what works for people who are maybe menstruating or have endometriosis still works. Now, what I would caveat that with saying is that we do know that there are more barriers to kind of exercise and health behaviors in perimenopause and menopause. And so I think it's kind of women understanding that we see that there are barriers, but ultimately the how to live healthy doesn't change. But I think having awareness of how we can break down those barriers for menopausal women is probably one of the biggest things that I see.
Amazing. So what kind of barriers do you see come up?
Yeah, so I mean, if we look at the research, I would say one of the main barriers is confusion, not knowing where to start, particularly with things like resistance training. Another huge barrier is not feeling that they are capable. I think when you have a lot of hormonal fluctuations and changes during perimenopause and menopause, a lot of women will talk about, losing confidence. And I think that's losing confidence in their body and their capability. And that sometimes makes them feel that they aren't capable of lifting weights. They aren't capable of joining a gym. So perceived capability is a big factor. Another factor that comes up a lot is busyness of life. If we kind of think about women in perimenopause, menopause, nowadays, because some women are having babies later in their life, they might have small children, they might have elder children, they might have aged parents that they are caring for, they might be at the peak of their career, they might have lots of different symptoms that become barriers for them exercising, like hot flashes, confidence, joint pain, all of these sort of things. So when we look at the research about exercise, we see all of these barriers played out, and I particularly see these barriers in clinic. Like, a lot of menopausal women I work with do not have a lot of time, and so then they're saturated with all this confusing rhetoric as to what they should do, and quite often we freeze when we feel like, oh, I don't know what to do, so we don't do anything, right?
Yeah, freeze mode comes in. That's a
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly what you said. Like women I speak to, that is definitely things come up. It's like time. Obviously, people are very busy, stressful lives, trying to juggle everything. The capability as well. I speak to some women that are like, oh, it's too late now. It's too late to like
Yeah.
get into the gym and do these things. But yeah, no, I think what, like you said, the misconception at the, when people are like, oh, I have to do like an hour in the gym and and it's like, no, actually, you work around the time that you have and what fits you.
Yeah.
Consistency can have flexibility. It doesn't need to look the same every week. It's fine.
Yeah, it definitely that. And I think I think women in general, or a lot of the women that I see clinically, can be quite dichotomous, and they're like, if I can't do an hour, there's no point doing 10 minutes. And I think it's kind of breaking that down and knowing that even starting with something really small and celebrating those small steps can actually have a snowball effect, and then miraculously people start to find the time. And so I think sometimes it can be the start, which is the hardest part, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess, like you said as well, with the overwhelming amount of information, that freeze mode comes in as well. But yeah, breaking it down and being actually, you don't need to do an hour, just do this. It's fine.
Yeah,
Good to know.
exactly.
Don't even have to go to the
Yeah,
gym.
yeah,
Oh,
100%.
amazing. So, um, obviously, obviously, there's a lot of information out there at the moment. Like, why do you feel like women feel so confused and overwhelmed about menopause, like right at this moment in time? It just seems to be a lot of confusion at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. A big question. Okay, so I think the first thing I would say is that we know that there is a gap within women's health research, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't actually start doing studies that were specifically for females until 1993. So women have been excluded in scientific data from like the mid 70s till 1993 because of the difficulties with doing scientific research when women have fluctuating hormones. Now, that's changed, and women now are involved in research, of course, but when we think about the fact that most scientific research takes about 17 years to disseminate into like general population knowledge, that's a long time. So 1993, my maths isn't great, but that's going to take you up to like 2010, 20, isn't it, something like that? And so really, yeah, so really what we have to think is the fact that we haven't had that research into women's health, and that has created a gap. And whenever there is a gap, someone will start to monopolize and fill that gap, and fill that gap with something that is sometimes exploitative, and is making them money. And menopause is a huge billion-dollar industry, and so what happens is people use this lack of knowledge around menopause to sell products. And so what happens is women will be sold supplements, And that's really confusing, because this supplement's going to do this for my skin, this supplement's going to make me feel less tired and sleep better, this supplement's going to give me less joint aches and pains. And so that's one big issue, is the supplement industry. I particularly find the supplement industry extremely exploitative, because the fact is most supplements are not third-party tested. I could literally put some protein powder in this water bottle and then sell it tomorrow as a menopause supplement with high protein, because it's just not regulated. And so there's so many supplements out there that we know just do not have congruent research behind them because it's profitable. The next thing I would say is, I think when it comes to nutrition, it is so confusing, because there's people standing in supermarkets shouting at packets of oats and telling you they're bad. And then there's another person telling you that the oats are really great and they fill you up all day. And so it's very difficult to fact check health information online, and the algorithm has very good ways of predicting things. So if you're starting to slow down on ultra processed foods and their effect to menopause, you're going to suddenly think that, ever having a biscuit is really bad for you. So the way that we get our information has changed, and it isn't policed, and people can say anything they want. And so I think, again, that can be confusing for menopausal women, because one person, keto worked for them, one person high carb worked for them, one person, I can't even remember different diets now, but the special K diet worked for them. So I think that's an issue. And then I think the final thing that's an issue is very confusing information around exercise. I definitely think people know that they need to be strength training more and more, but I think what people miss is that they think that they don't understand what strength training is, and they think the only way to strength train is to have a barbell and go into the gym, when actually when we talk about strength training, that can come in many forms, and it doesn't have to be this big intimidating thing that puts people off. So I really think it's so confusing for many reasons when it comes to health and menopause.
Yeah, I do. I like to break things down in simple terms. So I'm but like you said there about like the food side as well. Like I would say extreme sells. So if you've got like a really extreme view, if you think about anything like in the news, extreme does like sell. It gets airtime. So I think that's why like some of these things get way more airtime than they should, and it causes. But yeah, with regards to supplements, like as well, like you see so much out there, like with like I don't know, there's lots of stuff, but like I would like say you don't need half of that, well, more than half of it usually. But is there anything that you're like you should be focusing on, like obviously vitamin D and things like that? Is there ones that you're like, this is what you should focus on?
Vitamin D. Full stop. Okay, so let me caveat that. So I think if we're going to talk about any supplement, it would be vitamin D, like particularly if you're listening to this living in the UK, from the months between October to March, we're not even at the right access to the sun to be able to synthesize vitamin D, and it's very hard to obtain it from our diet. You'd have to eat about like 24 eggs or drink 2 litres of cow's milk to be able to get it. So supplementing vitamin D is something that is relatively easy and can definitely have good effects, and we know it can help to ease some menopause related symptoms and like joint related symptoms and muscle pain. We can't obtain that through our diet, so it's made from our exposure to sunlight, and because of where we live, that means that a lot of us aren't making any vitamin D. So that would be the one supplement that I would say, yes, we probably need that, right? The other thing that I would say can have some effect is omega-3, but I would caveat that with saying that only if you're not getting it from your diet. So omega-3 is a polyunsaturated fat which is found in like oily fish, and if you don't like oily fish, or you're not eating salmon or mackerel or whatever it is 2 to 3 times a week, you may want to think about supplementing omega-3. If you're a vegetarian or vegan, you can get it from an algae-based source. And so that would be one that I would say, if you are not obtaining it through your diet, then you could supplement it. The other one that I would say gets so much press in the online space is creatine monohydrate. And yes, creatine does have some effect. I would caveat this with saying that the bar is set in hell when it comes to supplements. So when you actually unpick the data around creatine monohydrate, particularly specifically to menopausal women, women who supplement creatine may be able to get one more rep when they're doing upper body exercises, but we don't see huge effects in how wonderful it is. But the problem is people overhype it or are so excited by it because compared to other supplements, at least it does something, right? I would say for some people, anecdotally, they think it changes their performance by taking creatine monohydrate because it is supposed to make us be able to recover a little bit better, be a bit stronger. But I think when you really unpick the research, it's not loads. So if you don't want to take it, does that mean you're not going to make strength gains? Absolutely not. Like, I think if I go on Instagram now, I would think that I will, creatine is everywhere, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I think there's kind of this falsified idea that if I mean, I've seen one advert that says, if you want a big bum, take creatine.
Really?
That is like, so that is massive amounts of misinformation because the
Yeah.
only real stimulus you need to build muscle is resistance training. Just taking creatine is not going to give you a big bum. And so I think creatine can have a small effect.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I take my vitamin D every day and I take fish oil because I don't eat oily fish. So,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Um, I was going to say like collagen as well. Collagen is a
Mm.
lot, a lot of noise out there, and I know a lot of my clients ask me about collagen as well, which I've got views on. But I'd like to hear like what your views are on
Yeah.
collagen as well.
My views are if you want to waste your money, go ahead. Um, now, look, I'm talking at a population level. If I were to look at the research studies into the effects of collagen on, and I'm looking at it from a musculoskeletal perspective, I don't know anything about dermatology or skin. But from a musculoskeletal perspective, when people say they're taking it for their joint health or like their muscle health or whatever they're taking it for, you have to think about the fact that when you ingest collagen, what happens is the enzymes in your stomach break it down before it even gets anywhere. There is no congruent evidence to support collagen. And I would go as far as to say, although I am not a dermatologist, I don't think even taking tablet form collagen has any effect on your skin. It is a waste of money. Now, look, if you're already taking it and you think it works for you, fantastic, crack on. It's probably a placebo, but that's fine. Placebo has a strong effect and that's all right. But I would never, ever tell any of my patients or clients to take collagen because I just don't think there's any convincing research that it works.
Yeah, that's like what I've heard as well. So I was just like, yeah, it's
Fantastic.
good. You mentioned about like social, we kind of touched on social media as well. Do you feel like, with regards to like women's health, perimenopause, menopause, do you think it's helped with raising awareness, or do you feel like it's been making it worse with the
I think
confusion?
I definitely think it's helped with awareness, and I think that is really fantastic because, if we roll it back like what, probably 10-15 years, people weren't talking about menopause. So I think that is fantastic, and I think social media has so many positives. I know a lot of people hate it, but I think it's really important place, and we have to keep up with the fact that people don't want to get their scientific information from an NHS pamphlet. And so I think it's really short-sighted, particularly if you're a clinician, to kind of poo-poo social media as a source of health information. We just need to get better at it. The problem is right now is that lived experience has taken over from scientific research and the way that we disseminate scientific research. So influencers are better at engagement and getting people to listen than people like myself, who is a scientist and a physiotherapist, because our content is deemed as boring. And so I think really what we have to think about is the fact that we have to keep up. Now, I also think that it is damaging in the fact that, you know, I think there are people out there who don't have qualifications, who are spouting lots of different health information, and I think that's a problem. But what I really think needs to happen is people who are academics or healthcare professionals need to get down off their pedestal and recognize that actually we have to keep up with social media, and we need to learn how to use its influence within our clinical practice, because otherwise people are just going to continue to listen to influencers who don't have qualifications to back up what they say. So I think it does a lot. It's really helpful in that it can impact and reach so many people, but sometimes there is lots of misinformation that I think can cause harm.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, 'cause there's obviously a lot of nuance there as well with, like you said, like there is the awareness, but then it's like sometimes it's not the correct information depending who's it's coming from as well. But yeah, it's always good to, I guess, check the viability and stuff as well with where you're getting your
Yeah.
information.
No, I think that's an
Um,
interesting point, is that, sorry, that like
yeah,
people don't tend to care about qualifications anymore, which
yeah,
is like, and then, you know, there's obviously people, we all sit in like little silos, don't we? So like in
yeah,
the academic community, we're like, oh, I've got this academic qualification, but like most people don't really like care about those things anymore. Lived experience is more important for some people, and so if you can say I've lived that and this is what worked for me, people like that. And so I think it's probably thinking about bringing those things together, you know, the gravitas of having qualifications in that area, but also recognizing that you probably need to work with people who have lived experience of that topic as well to make the strongest type of content.
yeah. It's collaborating as well. I guess
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah, it's why I like bringing in experts to my podcast as
yeah, there you
well.
go. Exactly.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Like again, because it's like, I know, I'm a personal trainer. I'm like, I've done my qualifications there and done my qualifications around nutrition, but there's things
Mm,
that I don't have, the knowledge on. Like, you're a
mm.
women's health expert, so of course your expertise mean a lot, and I know it'll mean a lot to the people listening as well, which is
Yeah,
great.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I want to talk about like the myth busting a little bit as well, because there's a lot of myths around like menopause, perimenopause as well. One of the things I know that comes up a lot is that weight gain is inevitable during menopause. Is this true or false?
It's false. So when we think about menopause, a lot of people assume that metabolism changes. Metabolism does not change. Our metabolism is constant between the ages of 20 to about 60. Most women are going through menopause at an average age of 51. So our metabolism doesn't change. However, what does change is a few things. So the first thing that happens is we see a sharp decline in the engagement of physical activity in menopause, and that is multifactorial. It's things that we already talked about, like competing demands, busyness of life, symptoms of menopause that make it challenging for women to want to move or exercise, or make them more hyper focused on hyper palatable foods, which then put them into a calorie surplus. So I would say the first thing is that and then the second thing I would say is that, so the change in movement is the first thing. The second thing that we find is that in perimenopause and menopause, where we store our body fat starts to change. So menstruating women tend to hold their body fat around their thighs and their glutes area. In
Yeah.
menopause, what we find is that women start to store body fat around their midsection, and there's ideas around the fact that this is because estrogen is declining and body fat contains a very weak type of estrogen called estrone. So the body starts to lay down those fat stores which has a weak estrogen in it around the midsection to try to boost estrogen. And then the third thing is a lot of people don't engage in resistance-based training in menopause. I think the statistics are as low as about, I think it might be even like 12% of women in menopause do enough resistance training. So when you when you don't engage in resistance training, you do start to lose muscle mass. And when we lose muscle mass requires more energy or more calories to keep it alive. So that means that when we lose muscle mass, we might lose some of the effect that the muscle will take more calories to keep alive. So that again can tip people into a calorie surplus. And so I think these things can be big factors in like menopause. So change in movement, muscle mass changes because of disengagement in exercise as well, and changes in where we store body fat. But ultimately, you can look at that one way or you can look at that another. The one way that you can look at it is when women say to me, oh, my metabolism's changed, and I'm like, no, it hasn't, they can be annoyed at that and think, well, what does she know? She's not menopausal. Or they can think, oh, well, fantastic. If it's not just aging that has led to me putting on weight, then I can adjust and change things to allow me to lose weight if that is my goal. So I think it's kind of empowering to know that we're not all just going to put on weight just because we're in perimenopause or menopause. And in fact, if we change some of our behaviours, we can continue to see changes in body composition if that is what we want.
Yeah, that's perfect. Like obviously there's the psychology behind that. Like you said, it's the thinking that, oh yeah, I can't do it, like, and it is definitely the factors. Yeah, like because I kind of knew that your metabolism stayed steady through menopause, well, perimenopause as well. But it's like the reasons, again, what we said at the beginning is like exactly that. It's like people's lives change, or they're not engaging in physical activity as much, and that's the reason. And like muscle mass goes down, and yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like you said, I think people don't like to hear it as well. When you're like, it's not perimenopause or menopause while you're
unfortunately you have a degree of control within this, and you can look at that negatively or positively, but ultimately I think if you think, oh, actually I do have control in this, that's empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. Which does bring me on to actually the training and exercise side, because there is a lot of talk out there, like people need to train differently in menopause, and there's a lot of things that, like, I guess, that aren't helpful. So yeah, what's kind of like the nonsense that's out there about like how you should train in menopause? And I know obviously we've already talked about that lifting weights and being resistant, that some form of resistance training is what you should be focusing on.
Yeah. I think one of the big ones I see is that you have to lift heavy. And so I think that actually becomes a barrier to a lot of women, particularly if they've never lifted before and now they've got these menopause symptoms and someone is telling them that they need to lift, and they're thinking, oh gosh, I need to go to a CrossFit gym and get under a rig and I don't even know where to start. And the reality is you don't have to lift heavy. You can use resistance bands. You can use pink 2 kilo dumbbells at home. If we look at the data when it comes to building strength or gaining muscle tissue, all that matters is that you get to a level of fatigue. I might get there by doing 50 reps with my 2 kg pink dumbbells at home, or I might get there by doing 8 reps of my 20 kilo dumbbells at the gym. It doesn't matter if I get to fatigue. So if you feel that, lifting heavy is something that is a bit of a barrier and you feel more comfortable lifting at lighter loads, whether that's resistance bands or dumbbells, it doesn't matter. You can still gain muscle mass. The issue is getting to fatigue. A lot of people, if you say to them train to failure, so when you can't do any more, they actually train to fatigue, because, myself included, I need someone yelling down my neck to be able to get to true failure. But, getting to a state where you think, oh, I can't do like another 1 or 2 reps, that's where you want to be, and it doesn't matter how you get there.
Yeah, I'm just reminding myself in the gym when my muscles like tight, they're like no more.
Literally, yeah. That's where you want to get to, and I think I run a menopause strength class. Particularly, it's in the NHS so it's for people who have never lifted weights before. And one thing a lot of people will say to me after is, I didn't realise that I could push myself to those limits. Like I thought that was bad. So you shouldn't finish a set or you shouldn't finish your set with like feeling like, oh, I've got way more in the tank. Like you need to get to fatigue. It doesn't matter what weight you're using, you just need to get to that point. So I think that's definitely one when it comes to exercise science. I think another big one is this idea that you should never train fasted. And
Yeah.
so if we look at the research, you can train fasted. Now, the reason that this has come to the forefront is because, like anything, there's a kernel of truth in everything, right? And so if you are not eating enough calories throughout the day, what can happen is you can go into a state of low energy availability, and if you're training fasted, that is more likely to push you into that. However, if you are eating sufficient calories throughout the day and protein, it doesn't matter if you train fasted or fed. And so I think a lot of women think now, particularly with like very prolific scientists online saying that you must have protein shakes before you go to the gym in the mornings. That again creates a barrier for some women, particularly women who need to go to the gym at like 5:30 a.m. and they're thinking, oh, I can't eat before I do that. And we don't have any evidence to suggest that you shouldn't go on. You have to fuel. Some people like to fuel, some people don't, and that's absolutely fine. As long as you are eating sufficient calories throughout the day, it is not going to be a problem for you or put you into a state of low energy availability.
Ah, I love that. More myth busting. I like
Yeah,
it.
I think I've got. I guess my other. Do you want me to carry on?
Oh, I mean, if you've got another
Yeah.
one, yeah, go
I
for it.
have, yeah. I think the other one is the weighted vest type.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen this? Yeah. So there's like a lot of very prolific menopause advocates online who suggest that you build bone density in menopause, which we're at risk of losing after menopause because there's a higher risk of osteoporosis. So these people online are saying that if you walk in a weighted vest, you build bone density. And this is not true. The person is generally selling weighted vests, and that's why they want you to buy one. Actually, if you look at the research into weighted vests, if we break down the research itself, those people in the study were actually wearing weighted vests and doing resistance training, and they saw increase in bone mineral density. But we can't extrapolate out that that was the weighted vest, and we probably know from the research that it's far more likely to have been the resistance training. So if you like to walk in a weighted vest, fine, but it doesn't negate the fact that you need to do resistance training. And of course, the weighted vest itself can be a form of resistance, but just walking in a weighted vest is not going to do the job. We want to be resistance training, squats, lunges, all those things in the weighted vest and getting to fatigue in those sets for it to be useful.
Compound movements need to be done,
Yes,
basically.
exactly. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I was going to say as well, because obviously we talked about weight training, but I guess why is it so important? Like I know you mentioned there osteoporosis, bone density, but I guess like because we've talked about it a lot, I think it's good to know like why it's so important as well.
Yeah. So resistance-based training is very important for different reasons. Like we said, one of the first things is bone mineral density. So it can help to weight bearing or lifting exercise can help to build bone mass, which depletes or can deplete post during menopause. So lifting weights can be a way to mitigate that or build bone mass. The other thing that lifting weights does is it helps to build skeletal muscle, and we know that like building skeletal muscle mass is like the elixir of life, really. It has so many benefits. To have a lot of muscle mass has the benefit of your metabolic health, so it can help to reduce your risk of diabetes by improving your insulin sensitivity. It can help with your mobility. It can help to reduce your fracture risk in later life so that you can remain independent. We know that it can improve body image and help with feeling strong, makes you feel strong in your day-to-day life as well. I mean, there's so many benefits to lifting weights, and we know that more people need to be lifting weights. What I would caveat this with saying as well is that doesn't mean that cardio is not important too.
Yeah.
And so cardiovascular exercise is equally important. When a woman goes through perimenopause and the menopause transition, she's at an increased risk of a cardiovascular disease, and so we need to also prioritize cardiovascular exercise, and that can be 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise across the week, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity cardiovascular exercise, but one doesn't negate the other. And you know, the kind of gym bros that say, oh, you don't need to do cardio, just lift weights, they have no idea about long-term health, and particularly the risks of women not doing cardiovascular exercise. So I would say that that is of equal importance too.
Yeah, I love that. Like, yes, about balance, and like I said, between need both. We need both.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, yeah.
So I was gonna move on to like the nutrition side, because I obviously I work with a lot of women coming out diet culture, yo-yo dieting. A lot of them have been in calorie deficit a lot of their lives. So what really matters, like nutritionally, around perimenopause and menopause?
I think it's a really interesting subject actually, and it wasn't until like I went to a conference last year that there was a talk, and it was about menopausal women. And basically what happens is we see these body composition changes that we talked about, where we start to put on fat around our midsection in perimenopause and menopause because of those hormonal changes. And what this speaker was saying, that as a result, women who are perimenopausal, menopausal now tend to come from, as you said, a time of diet culture. And so they see these changes in their body composition, and their immediate response is to dramatically restrict their intake and go back to that kind of yo-yo diet, high restriction sort of lifestyle. So that body composition change might have been one of their first menopause related symptoms. And then what they do is they massively restrict their calorie intake, and as a result, their body starts to down regulate their period, and so then their period might become irregular or stop, and they think that that is actually a perimenopause symptom, but actually it's a symptom of the fact that they've restricted their calories so much. And so I think we need to kind of step away from this idea that less is more and restriction is better, and really start to focus on our nutrient density of each meal. And the online space is constantly marketing like 200 calorie meals that's got like 50 grams of protein, and it misses the point, because actually you need a mixture of lots of different things. You need the carbohydrate, you need the protein, but you also need the fat. And actually I think we'd be so much better off in looking at each meal and making sure we had all of those things, and maybe having a 500 to 700 calorie meal, which is a normal amount of calories in a meal. And I guarantee when you do that and you have a decent sized meal with all those nutrients in, you feel fuller, and you'll only eat 3 meals a day, and you won't need to worry about what's a 100 calorie high protein snack, because you've actually got nutrients. And I think coming away from this idea of always looking for the least calorie option and thinking more about the nutrient density in each meal is important. Protein obviously has got the best marketing campaign going, and now every single thing in the supermarket contains protein, which is a bit weird. Like, to me, like, unless it's a normal protein source, why are you looking to get your protein from bread like it's a carbohydrate? And I think we have to be really careful of the fact that unless you understand nutrition, you might pick up this high protein bread thinking, oh, I'm getting my protein in here, but actually it's only, to be high protein, it only needs to have a tiny bit more protein than the other product. And so just a marketing dream, like just shove the word protein in and put an extra couple of seeds on and you can call it high protein. So look, I'm not saying protein isn't... Pardon?
An extra cost as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think protein is important. We can't get away from that. But I think sometimes the protein requirements that I've seen people put online are wildly high. The reality is, like, most women need 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, and so I don't think we need to go so high that you don't want to eat anything else, because actually we need fiber, and this
Yeah.
is like the real problem, is that in the UK people get about 5 to 15 grams of fiber a day, and we actually need like 25 to 30 grams. And when we think about the regulation of estrogen, that comes from having good amounts of fiber in our diet, which helps to regulate hormones. So I would say fiber is a real big one. So having a large variety of fiber in your diet is going to be really, really important for your hormonal health, but also for like your pelvic health. So that would be my next one. And then the last thing is not completely cutting out fats. Like, you can't regulate sex hormones if you don't have fats in your diet. So constantly looking for low fat options or not having fats in your diet is problematic as well.
Yeah, no, that's really important. Like, because I say to people, like, when they join me, because I'm like, you are singing to the choir here about what you've
Yeah.
just all said, because I'm like, yep, yep, yep. Like, I never buy these like protein breads and stuff. 'Cause it's like, yeah, just have bread because of like you want bread, not don't try and like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
very minimal amount of protein in it if you look.
Yeah.
But also like working on the nutrition, I call them the nutritional foundations. Like, am I getting enough fruit? Am I getting enough veg? Are you getting like the starchy carbs in? Like, you're getting fats in. You need to be able to do this. And I like do have a background of like this is the reason why I became a coach, because I was in that diet culture. Like, you know, I did
Yeah.
really like low fat everything. But now I like have full fat milk. Like, do you know what I mean? I just like
Yeah.
completely flipped. Scary to start with when I did
It
it,
is
but
scary. Yeah.
I feel so much better. And
Yeah.
same with my clients as well. I want to get them to eat like proper meals, like substantial meals every day, like, you know, regularly as well. Their food noise disappears, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not thinking about all this like snacks and sweets and stuff anymore." And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause your body was craving things, and now you're satisfying it," which really makes a
Exactly.
difference.
Yeah.
Perfect.
100%.
So I was going to say, because you mentioned about the early signs of perimenopause there, about like, you know, usually seeing in it our stomachs, or a lot of women do. Are there like, what are the other early signs, or what women often miss?
Yeah, I think everyone just thinks about their period, but there's often signs way before, like changes to your menstrual cycle or menstrual cycle dysregulation. I would say one of the early signs is like joint pain, particularly in your small joints, like your hands and your feet. So starting to see like achy hands and feet can be an early sign, most definitely. Potentially anxiety or mood changes can also be a big sign as well. Then we might think about like pelvic health changes. So there's something called the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, and this is where women start to see changes in their pelvic floor function or their vulval health. So what we might find is that women might be reporting painful sex when they never had painful sex before, or they might have like vaginal dryness, or they might have started leaking a bit of urine, or have like changes to their digestion, or like a heavy feeling in their vagina. And this can be like estrogenic changes that are affecting the health of the vulval tissues. And so there are many signs, and it doesn't necessarily just come down to your menstrual cycle. I think something to remember is that estrogen has an impact on every cell in your body. So ultimately we can have like symptoms everywhere, but I do think ones that are often missed are pelvic floor changes, pain in the small joints of the hands and the feet, potentially body composition changes, and mood changes. Or something that I see a lot is women just say they feel more anxious and they don't know why, like nothing's changed, but they just feel way more anxious.
I was going to ask you about like the impact on the mental health side and the emotional side
Mm,
actually
mm,
as
mm,
well. So
mm.
is it just like anxiety, or is there anything else like that comes up with like, I guess
Oh,
even confidence,
yeah.
identity, all that stuff?
I think confidence, I think identity, I think changes in like self-esteem. I definitely think like mood swings can be a thing, you know, feeling really tearful one minute and then rage the next. Definitely anxiety as well. Sometimes lack of concentration, brain fog, feeling like disengaged, not feeling motivated. I think these can all be signs as well, most definitely.
Oh, amazing. Thank you for that. So what are some great like practical takeaways that people can take from this? Like if you had to like simplify this for women, what should they actually focus on?
I would say that you already know what a healthy lifestyle looks like. And nothing changes in perimenopause and menopause. And so I often ask the question, if you're seeing something online, is that empowering you or is it exploiting you? Because if they are selling you something that sounds like it's too good to be true, I'm telling you it is. Because actually, everything comes back to a Mediterranean leaning, nutrient dense, balanced diet. Strength training twice a week with some cardiovascular exercise, and then also looking after your rest, your sleep, your recovery as much as you can, which can be a challenge, and also looking after your social circle and continuing to interact with your community, your family, spending time with your friends. These are like the cornerstones of our health, and they don't change when we are perimenopausal or menopausal. So the basics work, and they work for a reason, and the hormonal environment may be changing, but actually, in fact, you don't need to like overhaul everything and become a completely different person. You just need to focus on the real basic things and try to drown out the noise of someone trying to sell you something that sounds too good to be true.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing advice. So before we close up, Chloe, today, this has been an incredible conversation. I know a lot of people listening to this will probably have some, leave this. I can't speak now. Leave it with some really good advice. So before we wrap up, what is one thing that you would want women to leave this conversation knowing?
I think my one thing would be that if it sounds too good to be true, it is. And so
Perfect.
I would, especially when you're scrolling on TikTok and when you're scrolling on Instagram, it probably is too good to be true, and think that it's the consistency with the boring basics that get most people to the healthy state that they want to be.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Chloe, where can people find you?
Probably the best place to find me is on Instagram. My handle is at Chloe Lewis Physio, and you can always ask me questions on there. I don't mind. That's absolutely fine. And yeah, that's probably the best place, I think.
Perfect. I'll pop the link below this episode in the description anyway for anyone that wants to get hold of you. But thank you so much, Chloe. That was an incredible conversation. I've really enjoyed that. But yeah, thank you all for listening, and I will be back on the next episode. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.